Now, I've been interested in seeing this little movie called Shock-O-Rama ever since December of 2005, actually, which was when I bought my first ever issue of Fangoria magazine. It had an article on the movie which definitely caught my attention. I mean, I could tell that it wasn't necessarily going to be a grand masterpiece or anything, but uh, at the same time, it just sounded like the type of movie that would be really fun to watch. And so, years went by, and as I discovered Amazon and started adding dozens upon dozens of DVDs to my wish list, I somehow remembered this title, and I found that I could get this four movie collection for cheaper than the Shock-O-Rama DVD by itself. And, excuse me, something that came as a very pleasant surprise to me when I got this was that it wasn't like one of those midnight horror DVDs that you can get for $5 to $10, where you just have a bunch of movies crammed onto one disc with no special features or anything and pretty low quality. Uh, these movies are all on, their own individual discs, complete with special features and everything. And it came with pamphlets for three of the movies. I mean, how awesome is that? Um, so getting into the movies, were they worth it? Well, I can tell you for a fact that the main attraction here, Shako-Rama, was well worth it. Uh, to sort of give you an idea of what the movie's about, it's an anthology film. There's one big wraparound segment along with, two segments that are, you know, within it. The wraparound involves this young B movie scream queen who, finds herself in a situation not unlike that which her characters face in many of the terrible films that she's been in. And then the sort of short films within the film that are in it. One involves this guy who owns a junkyard who is attacked by these little one-eyed aliens, and this one utilizes a lot of stop-motion animation, which I loved seeing, especially in a film that was made during the 2000s. Nowadays that's kind of a lost art. And as a side note, I am aware that there's this cult film out there called Manborg, which also uses a lot of stop motion. But honestly, I thought that film was really boring. Shaka-Rama was the type of film that I expected Manborg to be. Moving on, the other segment in Shaka-Rama is basically following this group of women who are participating in an experiment where these mysterious people are studying their dreams. They find that there are very similar things that are sort of linking their dreams together, and it becomes pretty suspicious. And that segment was easily the most creative out of the three. As they showcased the dream sequences, they were really fun to look at, and they came up with some pretty awesome visuals, although they were some very cheaply made ones. But, the director was just working with what he had on hand. And, there are a lot of cases where I'll be checking out these sort of B grade horror movies, hoping that they'll be a lot of fun, and then they'll just turn out to be plain bad and just extremely boring. I mean, one prime example is the original Subspecies. I know that I have a figure of Radu sitting up there. I know that I'm pointing in the right direction now. But I love the second and third Subspecies movies. The first one was just really dull and forgettable. That movie was kind of a disappointment to me. But the thing that kind of makes Shock-O-Rama stand out is that it's clear to see that it was made by people with a passion and a love for what they were doing. The director and the actors and everyone, you can tell just by watching the film that they were all having a great time, and they actually cared about what they were working on here. And of course, it's a film that moves. There's hardly ever a dull moment in it. Um, Even though there are some pretty bad moments, they are pretty fun to watch. Now, getting into the other three movies, there are two movies on here which strangely kind of decrease the value of the collection. Um, I was thinking, wow, no wonder this is cheaper than Shock-O-Rama by itself. But yeah, one of them is this movie called Screaming Dead, which is a pretty cool sounding title. And it starts with this really intense scene that, grabbed my attention. But then after that, there was this really long scene of dialogue, and I was able to sit through that pretty well. And then after that, there was more and more talking with, nothing else happening. And then something, strange and creepy happens, and then it just, gives way to more talking and talking and talking and more talking. And I wasn't even able to finish the movie. I remember there was this interview with Misty Munday on the Bite Me DVD, because she was in that film as well as Screaming Dead, and she talked about Screaming Dead briefly. As she was, discussing that film, they showed this footage of all kinds of crazy shit happening, which must have happened within like the last 5 or 10 minutes of the film, because I'm like, where the hell was that? I might go back and skip to the final act, because it did look like the film had some pretty cool visuals to show off, but once again, there should have been more of that happening throughout the film. I mean, if you're an up-and-coming screenwriter and you're interested in writing something that's very dialogue-heavy, that's great. But, I mean, take a note from Quentin Tarantino. Take a note from Kevin Smith while you're at it. Make the subject of the dialogue interesting. Have your characters talk about something that the audience will find interesting and relatable. Don't just have them sitting there saying stuff, because saying stuff is different from having an actual conversation. So, yeah, enough about that. As for the plot of the movie, there wasn't one. And then the third movie that I started to watch was Bacterium, which had more going on in it, to its credit. There's this flesh-eating virus that, the government is trying to keep contained. And then you're following these people who are running through the woods playing paintball when, they happen upon this area where the virus has broken out. And on top of that, there are these men in hazmat suits and gas masks coming after them, trying to keep them from escaping alive. And, it's the type of thing that could be, at least mildly entertaining. There was, more movement to the story, but they still managed to make it just sluggish as hell. I just kept falling out of what was happening, and just like Screaming Dead, it was a movie that I couldn't really bring myself to finish. So, with that, moving on to the last movie in the collection, Bite Me, I mentioned that I was watching an interview on that DVD, and the fact that I was willing to actually watch the special features on the DVD should tell you something. That usually means that I actually like the movie. But yeah, it kind of brought me back around. You know, it had the same energy to it as Shock-O-Rama. Um, the plot's pretty stupid, you know, but again, don't expect anything Oscar worthy here. There's this crate of marijuana that gets delivered to a stripper club, and I don't even remember where this comes from. Um, there's that bad memory again. But somehow there are these mutated spiders in the weed, which, you know, end up getting out of the crate and attacking people. And also, by the way, side note, the stripper club itself is in the shape of a giant Godzilla statue. That's that was pretty cool. But yeah, one thing, there were a lot of things that confused me about Bite Me. For one thing, the spiders are pretty much ticks. You know, they look like them, and when they attack people, they're drinking their blood and becoming engorged with it and everything, and yet the characters in the movie refer to them as spiders for some reason. And then there's a female bartender in the movie who people comment on. Like, one guy says that she's the European chick, and then there's a guy who's talking to her asking where her accent comes from. And you know, after that little bit of dialogue, I was kind of sitting there listening for an accent. Like, okay, she kind of sounded a little bit Swedish there. No, she sounds American. Like, she didn't have even a remotely European sounding voice. She spoke with the same kind of plain American accent that I'm talking with right now. But, you know, confusing things like that, strangely enough, made the movie even more enjoyable to watch. It was really just the epitome of so bad it's good filmmaking. And once again, just like Shock-O-Rama, they utilize stop motion animation in here, you know, with the spider ticks, whatever the hell they are. Like, they're not these little puppets that are stiffly crawling across the floor, and they're not CGI animated. They're stop motion. You can see their legs moving and everything. So, once again, that was pretty fun to look at. But yeah, in the end, I think this collection is well worth the money, at least for two of the movies. As long as you're into movies that are so cheesy that they're, you know, great and they're just fun to watch, and as long as you have a sense of humor for this type of stuff, then the Shock-O-Rama horror collection comes highly recommended. And with that, I hope y'all have a good one.